Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Hey everybody, this is the Digital Asset Investor. Now, this video has been a nightmare for me, this particular video, because originally what I did is I was recording the video and I had a zero hedge article up, and that article had gotten completely mangled. That's why I'm off my game here. Didn't announce myself as the Digital Asset Investor. So I did part of the video, computer froze up from the zero hedge article. Then I had to shut the computer down. Then I recorded the second half of the video. Then I found out that the first part of the video had been corrupted during the shutdown. Complete nightmare. So if this video in any way seems out of kilter, I wanted to make sure that you knew that was the reason why. Before I go into the video, I want to tell you up front, and I said it before and I'll say it again, and that is, every once in a while someone sends me something that is it's just an article or something that where everything kind of comes together. You start thinking of all sorts of things you've read and heard over the last couple of years on Twitter and in YouTube and different things, and it all kind of comes together in your mind, and you can't help but think this has all been planned. Well, that's what happened to me today, and that's what I'm going to get into. It's from the Zero Hedge article, which, by the way, you will never see me put a Zero Hedge article on this show again. And I may, in the second part of this video, you may hear me repeat that, and it's only because this has become a total cluster, you know what. But anyway, first, I wanted to make sure that I gave this guy his title that he asked for. And I'm not even going to remember exactly what his title was. He's a I think he called it a railroader, like a railroad engineer. But his name is XR Fanatic at JP_HYSIQE. Now, he wants to be the official railroader of the Digital Asset Investor channel, and I'm glad to do it because we have no railroaders here. Okay, what inspired me for this video today was the official Digital Asset Investor's neighbor. He texted me the Zero Hedge article. It was an article from back in July that I had totally missed. And when I read it, I'm going to read a part of it to you, and I think everything will come together, what we've all been talking about for the last 2 years. I want to give special credit to some of those guys, like and they're mentioned later in the video, but like some of these guys like SPQR Media and Love for Crypto. I would probably throw To the Lifeboats, and there are a lot of people who have done some deep dives over the last year or two that probably saw a lot of this way before guys like me did. I get my ideas from people that are smarter than I, and I've found that that's a good way to do things. But anyway, so I got this article today, and the article is called "Trump's Fight with the Fed Over Interest Rates is a Scripted Farce." And here we go. Trump's companies have faced at least 4 separate bankruptcy threats since the 90s. I'm going to get some water here. Yet he has been bailed out on more than one occasion by surprise investors. The most prominent of these investors was the Rothschild family through their agent Wilbur Ross. Trump was saved from his vast debts tied to his Taj Mahal casino complex and 3 major properties by the Rothschilds in the 1990s. And some of these properties would go on to face bankruptcy again in 2009. The Taj Mahal would later sell for 4 cents on the dollar, yet Trump would always come out financially unscathed from these events. Trump's reputation and perhaps his entire current fortune is owed to the Rothschilds. This is probably the reason why, after becoming president, Trump loaded his cabinet with multiple globalists and banking elites, including Wilbur Ross as his commerce secretary. Trump is this is the most important paragraph, folks. Trump is a perfect foil or catalyst to create the kind of chaos the banking elites need as cover for an event they sometimes refer to as the global economic reset. The economic reset is meant to cut a path to complete global centralization, meaning a one-world monetary system controlled by the IMF, a one-world currency, and ultimately a one-world government. The Rothschilds, among many other elites, have publicly admitted to this plan numerous times, displaying their schemes in plain view in publications they own or control, like The Economist magazine. We've seen that magazine cover 1,000 times in the XRP community. Trump's sudden shift from harsh critic of the U.S. economic situation to taking ownership of every facet of the economy as if he is the sole cause of its supposed ascension is entirely deliberate. Trump is meant to take ownership of the U.S. economy because he is meant to take the blame for its inevitable crash. If we look at almost every fundamental indicator, a crash is already taking place now. We see the housing market suffering from a 7.8% drop in sales and an 8.1% drop in prices. We see auto market sales at the lowest pace of 4 years. And as interest rates rise on auto loans, we see historic levels of consumer debt and corporate debt. We see massive retail closures, more than 7,500 closures announced so far this year. A grinding halt to shipping and freight, 7-year lows in global manufacturing PMI, the weakest U.S. manufacturing PMI since 2009, and a 3-month running inversion on the Treasury yield curve, etc. You will not see the Federal Reserve, the mainstream media, or Donald Trump mention much about these signals of decline. The media will pay lip service at times, while also promoting the notion that employment, GDP, and the stock market are sure signs the economy is strong. Trump no longer argues that these indicators are rigged, even though unemployment stats do not include over 96 million working-age Americans that are unemployed and are not counted on the benefit rolls, even though GDP is calculated to include most government spending, as if it is the same wealth creation rather than wealth confiscation, even though the stock market is entirely manipulated by unprecedented corporate stock buybacks, as well as levitated by Chinese stimulus measures flooding the global liquidity pool and investor hope that the Fed is about to reintroduce QE at any moment. This is where we see the collusion between Trump and the media and the Fed. None of them will admit that the U.S. economy is a fraudulent illusion. All of them are actively hiding the facts from the public. All of them are setting the American people up for an epic fall. The elites intend to use Trump as a parable, a warning to future generations. They will say, you see, this is what happens when you allow populists and nationalists to take power. This is what happens when the conservatives are allowed to propagate their crazy ideals. This is what happens when you try to interfere in the autonomy of central bankers who know better than you how to run the economy. You get a catastrophe. If the Fed actually does capitulate one of these days, then history can blame Trump for putting political pressure on central bankers who are supposed to be independent. If the Fed does not capitulate, Trump continues his attacks on the institution. History can still blame Trump for sowing the seeds of doubt and damaging faith in the U.S. financial structure. In the meantime, the Fed and other central banking institutions have created all the elements necessary to cause a devastating blow to the global economy and most of all the U.S. economy. If Trump were a legitimate patriot and defender of the U.S. interest, he would detach his administration from the stock markets and openly admit to all the factors that show our financial system is failing. But he will not do this. This is not his job. His job is to act chaotic, to confuse the public, to play shepherd to conservatives while leading them to the slaughterhouse, and to become a scapegoat for a crash the central bankers set in motion over 8 years ago before Trump became president. Now, folks, I'm not making a political statement. This isn't about Trump. This is all bigger than Trump, I believe. This is about all politicians. It's not one side or the other. This is about power and money. And it's not putting the blame on one side or the other. This is a much bigger thing. So after I read this, my wheels were, I had articles that I've seen and videos I've seen that were just popping into my head. And so I went back to look, the first of which was this from Tony Valentino yesterday. I went through this. He says it wasn't Visa who battled to buy Earthport. Rothschilds made the deal. And this Tony Valentino just all of a sudden started bringing up the Rothschilds out of nowhere. He said, it's a fact, as most of you know, or Google search if you didn't know. If there's going to be a new monetary system, it can't be done without the blessings and approvals of the Rothschilds gang. Now, this is the point in the video where I had to redo it, and so what you'll see from here was actually done before this part of the video, but it's the correct flow for what I was trying to present. So I hope you enjoy it. And even if parts of it sound like I'm saying things I've already said, that's the reason. So thank you.
Well, sorry, that took me totally off my game. That zero hedge article, I kept it up too long. I think it literally crashed my entire computer. That's why I think I wish Zero Hedge had horrible information on their website, because I hate going to their website. It messes my computer up every time. Zero Hedge has got to do something about that, because I will never pull your website up again on this computer. It's just crazy. That is ridiculous when a website crashes, is so loaded down with garbage that it crashes your computer every time. Okay, enough. So I wanted to go back and show you, this was the article that I Googled when I saw Tony's tweet. Visa to buy British payments firm Earthport for $250 million. And we went to the bottom of the page and confirmed that yes, he's right. Rothschild and Company advised Earthport on the deal, while Goldman Sachs advised Visa. Well, you see a few of these things, it's one thing, but when you see the article the parts of the article I just read to you from the official neighbor of the digital asset investor, you combine it with what this Tony guy keeps mentioning Rothschild, and then he mentions it again. And I missed this tweet, but I found this one. This was yesterday. Miguel Valles, when Rothschild green light and how high? Asking for this guy and every XRP holder, curious to know when the Rothschilds plan on shifting over to the new system, before or after World War III or financial crisis. And he's tweeting out this thread here, and this says, oh man, XRP so close to rally, question is only how big. And so when I've been reading those tweets, and I saw the Zero Hedge article, and different things that I have seen over the course of the last year and a half, 2 years, started to pop into my head, things I remembered, and even the article, the Wikipedia thing I was showing you the other day about Bretton Woods, when I said that this was all created for the purpose of preventing World War III. It all has come full circle. Then I remembered love for crypto, and some of these guys that have talked about SDRs. And then I remembered some other things that came in. I'm going to show you as I go along here. The first thing I remembered was from XRP Darren. And a lot of these guys have been on this for longer than I have, and I'll admit that. XRP Darren's one of them too. At Fame 21 More. This is where he found a document. This is the annual report and audited financial statements from 2018 for Edmund de Rothschild Fund. And guess who Rothschild owns part of? SBI Holdings. The underlying equity, and then it says the period as the company was caught up in the optimism surrounding cryptocurrencies. SBI owns 8.7% stake in Ripple's XRP, with volatility in the underlying So bottom line is, Rothschilds own a portion of SBI. And then, so from reading that Trump article on Zero Hedge, the things I got out of it is that Trump's basically beholden to the Rothschilds. They've bailed him out over the course of the last few years, and now Trump is more or less the whole thing with him versus the Fed is one big farce, and that they are wanting to create the entire new global reset. That's what they want to do. Well, we've heard that term over and over and over. Now, we've also, and in that article also, it talked about the IMF and how the IMF is a core part of this. Jack the Rippler. This is from September 7th, 2019. If you go and watch this video, this is Ross Leclo, the IMF Deputy General Counsel. Somebody asked some kind of question of whether digital assets will be used by the IMF. And Brad Garlinghouse is literally almost giddy about the question. And this guy's stuttering all over the place. And Brad Garlinghouse smiles, laughs, looks at him and says, well, you can answer that or whatever. And it's one of those awkward moments that we've seen over the last year and a half where we're like, did we see what we just saw? It's one of those. We've seen a lot of them. Now, I also encourage you, I'm not going to go through this, but I encourage you to go to SPQR Media and give them a subscribe. These guys are hardcore researchers and they do heavy research, a lot more than I do. They deserve a lot of credit. Go give them a subscribe and go watch this video of theirs. XRP, Rothschilds links, interesting history of fuggers. I think I'm saying that right. But I watched through this and they present to you a lot of different Rothschild connections in all this. Well, then I decided that I would go to the International Monetary Fund Wiki. Now this is Wikipedia. The IMF, also known as the Fund, is an international organization headquartered in Washington, D.C., consisting of 189 countries working to foster global monetary cooperation, secure financial stability, facilitate international trade, promote high employment, sustainable growth, And then it says it was formed in 1944 at the Bretton Woods Conference. Now, I talked about Bretton Woods the other day. Here's that. And what did I pull out of Bretton Woods? The chief features of the Bretton Woods system were an obligation for each country to adopt a monetary policy that maintained its external exchange rates within 1% by tying its currency to gold, and the ability of the IMF to bridge temporary imbalances of payments. Now, the Bretton Woods system, the origins, I read to you as well the other day. The political basis of the Bretton Woods system was in the confluence of two key conditions: the shared experiences of two world wars, with the sense that failure to deal with the economic problems after the First World War had led to the second, and the concentration of power in a smaller number of states. In other words, it was to prevent World War III. Let's go back to the international monetary system. Now look at this. It says, it now plays this is the IMF, it now plays a central role in the management of balance of payments difficulties and international financial crisis. Countries contribute funds to a pool through a quota system from which countries experience balance of payments problems can borrow money. As of 2016, and this should jump off the page at you, the fund had XDR, not SDR, XDR, billion of about this, okay? That is the first place that I have seen XDR written. If I've seen it, I don't remember it. XDR. That would be the first time I've seen the X when spoken in terms of some type of payments currency X since I saw XRP. Now, let's go look at that. Special drawing rights. We've heard all these guys talk about this for the last year. Special drawing rights. Abbreviated SDR, ISO 4217, currency code XDR, are supplementary foreign exchange reserves assets defined and maintained by the IMF. SDRs are units of account for the IMF and not a currency per se. They instead represent a claim to currency held by IMF member countries. Now listen close, folks. Listen real close. They instead represent a claim to currency held by IMF countries for which they may be exchanged. SDRs were created in 1969 to supplement shortfall preferred foreign exchange reserve assets, namely gold and US dollars. Now listen real close, folks, as we get to this. See, SDRs are allocated to the IMF, by the IMF to countries and cannot be held or used by private parties. I want you to think pre-allocation theory, Bradcom's investment perspectives. SDRs are allocated by the IMF to countries and cannot be held or used by private parties. The number of SDRs in existence was around XDR 21.4 billion in August 2019. During the global financial crisis of 2009, an additional 182 billion was allocated. 182 billion is very close to the amount of XRP there are. 100 billion, which everybody has said was way too much. 182.6 billion was allocated to, quote, provide liquidity to the global economic system and supplement member countries' official reserves. By October 2014, the number of SDRs in existence was XDR 204 billion. Do you remember when Chris Larson was on stage at Money 2020 and he said that XRP could help prevent the next liquidity crisis if there was another financial crisis? And he talked about liquidity. That was a C3 Nick tweet about how the financial crisis, the real problem was liquidity. And then, but back to this XDR. Have you ever heard where they got, what the letters XRP stand for and where that came from? 3-letter currency. This is David Schwartz on Quora. What do the letters XRP stand for? And why does Ripple Labs call it XRP? 3-letter currency codes are formed by appending a single character to the 2-letter country code of the issuing country. Since the United States country code is US dollars have currency code USD. Some non-countries still have country codes. The EU has the country code EU, so the currency code for euros is EUR. Of course, XRP is not issued by any country. For assets not issued by any country, the first letter is X, must be X. No country codes starting with X will be issued. So, for example, since the chemical symbol for gold is AU, gold's currency code is XAU. Some people use BTC for Bitcoin, but people who care about standards use XBT. In the early days, we called the ledger's native assets Ripple, so the natural currency code to choose was XRP. So there is no country associated with XRP. Back to this. SDRs are allocated by the IMF to countries and cannot be held or used by private parties. I'm the digital asset investor. I'm not an investment advisor. This is for entertainment purposes only. Please subscribe and hit the like button. And tell your friends and family that sometimes all of the things just kind of fall into place and you have to wonder if it's all been planned for a long, long time. And I'm glad I'm part of the plan now. As a holder. Thank you for listening.